Awesome. So hello, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone to MTRI's fifth summer seminar of 2022. Each week in July and August, we will be hosting a talk on the biodiversity and conservation of Gespewick, Southwest Nova Scotia. My name is Morgan Snare, and I'm a summer research assistant here at the Mersey Tobiatic Research Institute. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that MTRI is in, and we are meeting from Gespewick, one of the 7 districts of Mi'kma'ki, homeland of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the treaties of peace and friendship, and we thank the Mi'kmaq people and their generosity for sharing their homeland with us. MTRI is a research-based nonprofit settled in Southwest Nova Scotia near Kedzie National Park and Historic Site, and also within the Southwest Nova Scotia Biosphere Reserve. Our mission is to promote, conserve, and sustain biodiversity in Gespewick and beyond. Tonight, I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Vett Lloyd, PhD, Professor of Biology at Mount Allison University. Next, I will hand the seminar over to Dr. Lloyd, but I would like to remind everyone to please keep your mics muted, and if you have any questions during the talk, please type them in the chat window. With that, Vett, you can take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I very much appreciate the invitation. And now we're going to start by me experimenting with technology to see if I can share my screen. Let's see how that works.
Looks great on my end here.
Okay, all right. Excellent. So the gist of what I'm going to be talking about is not pressing buttons randomly. So I'm talking about ticks, which many people know too well. So the Research Institute focuses on species at risk. We were just talking about the fact that ticks are not a species at risk, much as we'd like them to be. It's more a question of us being at risk when we go out to enjoy this beautiful part of the world. And it's important to get out, and we live in one of the most beautiful and amazing parts of the world. And it's important that we enjoy it. We just have to do so safely. So ticks are something we need to know about so that we can enjoy the world safely. So the official title, Lyme disease and other tick vector diseases, how not to get them. Really, I'm going to start with the issue of ticks. And the problem is that they are not good at social distancing. So here's your tick. And if it would just social distance, we wouldn't end up with tick with its head buried inside of you, sucking your blood with its nasty little harpoon-like mouth. So as we're just coming out of COVID restrictions, obviously the solution would be to persuade ticks to wear a mask. There we go. A nice tick wearing a mask solves the problem beautifully. Wouldn't you know it that ticks are non-compliant? So what do we do when we can't get the ticks to cooperate? So here's the question: what can you do to protect yourself, your family, your community? And I'm going to talk about 3 things. The first one is background on ticks. So what do we need to know about ticks? Then I'm going to talk about why we care about ticks, because if ticks were just little blood-sucking beasts, they'd be annoying, but no worse than that. Annoying and disgusting. Okay, I'll go with that. But the problem is that while they're sucking your blood, they're swapping it for whatever diseases they have inside of them. And those disease-causing microbes came from whatever wildlife they were snacking on before. So they're a very good way of moving diseases from wildlife into people. We haven't seen those diseases before, so that's bad news for us. So I'll talk about the microbes they can transmit, and then we'll talk about what can be done to protect yourself, so the practical side of things. But theory first. Ticks. There we go. Okay, so ticks and mosquitoes are both blood-sucking beasties, and beasts we love to hate for good reason. Ticks transmit more different pathogens than any other critter out there. Mosquitoes probably still cause the most illness and death just because there are so many mosquitoes. And I think pretty much everyone in the Maritimes is reminded of that every spring, summer, and fall. And even in the winter, you can still find a mosquito. At least I do. In terms of ticks, the most famous pathogen that it transmits is the bacteria called Borrelia that causes Lyme disease. And in North America, misspelt there. I don't know why, should fix that. Lyme disease infections are 6 times more frequent than HIV infections. And if we think about the social and public health messaging around safe sex and avoiding HIV infections, we really need that same sort of effort towards protecting people for Lyme disease. And it's not just North America. Globally, and particularly being led by Europe, they have a problem with Lyme disease as well. And it's estimated, a recent estimate is that 14%, 1 in 7 individuals has been exposed to Lyme disease or has it actively globally. So that's a lot of people. All right, so we've been monitoring ticks in New Brunswick. That's where my lab lives, on the border between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And this is where we started our surveillance. So I'm just going to show a very nice graphic done by Service New Brunswick, looking at what's happened with ticks here. And basically more and more ticks. So we don't have to dwell on that because most people here don't care about New Brunswick. What about Nova Scotia? Well, you guys, congratulations. You have the highest tick per capita ratio in all of Canada. And essentially the entire province, depending where you are, your choice is to be at high risk or still high risk. And there are degrees of high risk. But still, there are ticks everywhere and pretty much all the time. So congratulations on being the experts. I'm going to come back to that. I'm saying that slightly facetiously, but when we get to preventing illness, the things in prevention and dealing with ticks, particularly Southern Nova Scotia has been at the forefront in figuring out ways to deal with ticks and continuing to live with the ticks. So crash course in ticks biology. They're small. We know they're small. When they're baby ticks, they are about the size of a poppy seed, and they grow up to the great whopping size of a sesame seed. So they are small. The life cycle I won't dwell on. Basically, they start small and they get bigger. Good enough. The biggest stages are the adults, and when a female, it takes them 2 to 3 years to get to be adults. And each time they go through a stage, they have to take a nice big meal from someone. And if they get interrupted, they just keep going on someone else. If the female tick gets enough blood, she'll sit down and slowly and methodically, everything about ticks is slow and methodical, lay 2,000 to 3,000 eggs. And that's what's shown on the top of the screen. One female tick and the next generation. And if you think about what that having 2,000 to 3,000 babies does, it means you can have rapid population growth. Pictures of ticks. The females get really big when they take in blood and get the big puffy gray-yellow backside. They're always bigger than the males because the females get filled up with eggs. It's a male down on the bottom. And talking about eggs, there's a female tick where we accidentally knocked off the eggs, the head, and out popped eggs. And perhaps strangely for humans, the eggs are kind of in our chest, where we would have our chest, but anyway, ticks are different. All right, so this is a video which may or may not, oh, it's not going to play. So I had an animated video which won't play, so I'm going to go through it. It shows how a tick goes to get a blood meal. So we're going to go through it in stills. So ticks are known as stealth predators. They don't run after people, they don't chase people, they don't fly, they don't jump, with some minor technical exceptions. Mostly they hang out on vegetation, they hang on with their back feet. They've got 8, they've got lots to spare, and they stick their front feet out. And the front feet is where their smelling ability is. So they're waiting to smell your sweat and your breathing. And then they wave around, and if you're considerate enough to brush against them, they grab on with their front feet, and then they slowly crawl up your body. They go so slowly you don't feel them moving for the most part. They're going to crawl to a nice, warm, dank, dark space because they want to suck your blood for several days. So they don't want you to feel. So what's shown in the first image is the tick crawling around looking for the perfect spot. And we'll come back to that because that's where you look for a tick when you're doing a tick check. Once they find the perfect spot, they stick their harpoon-like mouth into you and they inject an anesthetic so that you don't feel them biting. And then they're just gonna hunker down and they're gonna slurp your blood. And because blood is mostly water, they don't want the water and they can't pee it out the backside because then you'd notice that they were there. So they just shove it back into you after it's sloshed around inside of the tick, picked up any pathogens they might have, and they inject the whole mess back into you. So your dinner and a sewer all in one. Isn't that lovely? Okay, so now that you're all warmed up to the subject of ticks, I apologize to people eating dinner right now, sorry. These are the type of ticks that we will find on people. There are lots of species, but these are the suckers that are on people. We've got our blacklegged or our deer tick, same beast, different name. That's the real problem for Lyme disease. Nova Scotia also has a whole lot of American dog / wood ticks, which are now invading New Brunswick. Thank you. You really shouldn't have. You could have kept them all, really. These guys don't normally transmit Lyme disease. They can transmit other things. There's no such thing as a good tick. And then sometimes we found the groundhog tick, which is kind of the blonde cousin of the blacklegged tick. We'll come back to these. So how do ticks get here and how do they move around? They're not very mobile on their own. They'll probably not go more than a meter or so over their life, but they can hitch a ride on mice for local movement, and then from long distance movement, they'll hitch a ride on a bird. So that's how they're going to move between countries, between regions, and even between continents. What do they do? This is how we ended up with the problem with Lyme disease. So initially, ticks came in on migratory birds. It would have come from a high-risk area where there was a lot of Lyme disease, mostly the New England states regionally. That tick is infected, shown by the tick on the left. And that tick will arrive here, drop off a bird, take its next meal from some local rodents. Those are some cute little shrews. They get infected. Another tick that's not infected will feed from the shrew, and then it will become infected, and then it will infect people and cute little puppies. So that's how the infection spreads through both wildlife and ends up in people and our pets. Where do ticks live? Basically everywhere. They love the Maritimes, and who can blame them? Basically, they'll live wherever mice live, and there are not a lot of places where mice don't live. They like forest, long grass, broken forest, whatever. When do we find ticks? Pretty much all the time. They're able to go look for a meal whenever it's above zero, basically. There's a peak tick season in the spring and a peak tick season in the fall. But you can encounter a tick pretty much anytime. You get a warm day shining on some liquid water, or you get a groundwater seep. So there is no safe time. Okay, that does it for ticks. We're now going to talk about the nasty bits inside of ticks, which are tick-borne pathogens. So I mentioned ticks are the winner of the how many different pathogens can you have contest. And I'm sure it's an active contest that occurs throughout all the little organisms in the world. We mostly worry about the pathogen that causes Lyme disease. We worry about that because it's the most common, but by no means the only one. It also, between the tick saliva and the Borrelia bacteria, they interfere with the host's immune response. In that case, we're the host. That sounds terribly gracious. They interfere with our immune response, which means that other bacteria the tick might carry or that you acquire from other places can then get entrenched and cause trouble. All right, so that's the theory. What's happening in Nova Scotia? My lab operates the Atlantic arm of the genetics tick testing company. So what do we find for Nova Scotia? We find a lot of Lyme disease. So it's certainly the incidence of Lyme disease in peak areas is much higher than this. This is a provincial average, but in areas of the South Shore and the New Glasgow area, you're in areas up there, you're much higher than 16%. We are not just finding the main Lyme disease bacteria, we're finding other species of Borrelia that's caused symptoms similar to Lyme disease. So from the point of view of the patient, it doesn't matter what it is. It does matter for testing because these other species are not going to be picked up by the blood test. We're also seeing other diseases such as anaplasma that's affecting dogs and people. And these numbers for 0 for Babesia, that's a kind of similar to malaria in symptoms and loosely in organism. We've now started testing for more Babesia species, and yep, sure enough, that's here too. Okay, so there are other things there, but let's focus on the Lyme disease bacteria. It's called a spirocheate bacteria because when it's growing happily, preferably in culture, it will make a nice sort of spiral form, looks like a corkscrew. It can be in that corkscrew shape, and that allows it to penetrate into different tissues. It basically burrows in, which is a disturbing idea. When it's faced with a hostile condition, such as a body with an immune system, it can form a resistant morph, basically curls up into a variety of morphs that are metabolically changed so that antibiotics won't work on it. And then it waits till the antibiotics go away and it hatches out again. It's just nasty. And the other thing it really likes is it really likes nerve tracts, which is actually the last place you want bacteria. And the lowest picture here shows a nerve cell, and the little green specks are the Borrelia that have sort of been drawn to the nerve cell because it wants, nerve cells are nice, tasty, nutrient-rich cells to eat. So they're nasty. There are also different species, as I alluded to, and in the United States, the CDC has a really nice map of where the different species are predominantly found. I haven't seen equivalent information for Canada. It doesn't really matter because these species are all everywhere, and certainly we're finding different Borrelia species in this region. And as I mentioned, the implications of this are that you can have an infection of something just like Lyme disease from your perspective, but the testing won't pick it up. So that's the pathogens. Where I want to spend my time is how not to get sick. So the ticks aren't going anywhere. We have to live here. We want to live here. It's a beautiful area to live. We can't just curl up inside and never dare to go out. We've just had a pandemic where that was what some people did. So it's time to get out and enjoy the beautiful outdoors. It's good for us. So how to do that safely with ticks? There are basically 3 things we need to do. The best thing is to prevent a tick biting you. Nothing works 100%. So if a tick gets through your defenses, how do you detect it quickly and how do you treat it quickly? Because treating it quickly works better than not treating it quickly. And if that doesn't work, what do you do if you've ended up with a late stage disease? Okay, starting at the beginning. This is the standard public health advice. There's a bunch of advice here. We're going to go through it step by step in a more visually appealing manner. avoid areas where ticks live is not that practical because that would be the Maritimes. And also, if you work in the outdoors, you can't exactly walk in the middle of trails. This is kind of more urban advice. Repellents work. You can treat your clothing. That works really well. Try not to roll in the grass. And there are things you can do to landscape your house. So repellents. There are both commercial and homemade tick repellents. For the commercial ones, generally speaking, if they say it repels ticks, it probably means it's been tested and it repels ticks. The primary ingredients there are icaridin or picaridin, which is the active ingredient in black peppers. You'd want to apply the repellent more actively than you need for mosquitoes because ticks are tougher than mosquitoes. Natural repellents vary because they're different recipes. Most are more volatile because if you can smell them, that means it's evaporating. So apply frequently. If you are not a human, so for all the dogs and cats watching, there are any number of products that are preventatives. You have the topicals that you can chase down your pet and put on your pet before it squiggles away. Or according to my puppy, they're the edible ones, which they just love. Okay, back to humans, or I suppose dogs. If you want to put clothes on your dogs, that's up to you. If you're out in the woods, if you see a tick crawling along your clothes, you can get rid of it. And if your clothes are light colored and not full of little black specks in pattern, they're easier to see. So that doesn't mean that, as I've shown here, you have to put on your bridal gown to go walking in the forest, nor for those who want to wear the white John Travolta style white leisure suit. You don't have to go that far. You can just wear light colored solid clothes. Khaki works fine. Mark's Work Warehouse has products where you have clothing that has permethrin already embedded in them. It's stable, or you can buy a product with permethrin and make your own permethrin treated clothing. Try not to spray it on yourself or cats in particular. For your house, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has some pretty good advice about house proofing. You can buy tick tubes that basically treat the mice that might be in your yard to get rid of ticks on the mice. That's good. There's new work in rodent vaccines so that even if there are rodents, they don't carry Lyme disease to give to the ticks that the ticks can then give to you. That's promising. There are sprays, everything from synthetics to garlic oils, oregano oil. Just beware that if you use it, your house will smell like a massive Italian dinner. Your neighbors might have something to say about that. If you go to the lab website, we also have advice from Pamela Balzer from Lunenburg. A landscaper who's very kindly shared the advice she gives about landscaping for tick proofing. So that's it for prevention. All right. Sometimes, no matter what you do, a tick is going to get on you. So what you want to do is get the tick off you before it's had time to bite, or if it did bite, before it's sucked up a lot of your blood. Best way to do that is a tick check. It's just got to be part of our lives. I know it's boring. You brush your teeth, you check for ticks. I don't enjoy it any more than anyone else, less so than young, attractive people who actually look good in a mirror. I don't. Just get over it. It's a way to figure out what's a mole and what's a tick. And as a hint, if it's small and black and has legs, it's not a mole. You want to get that off you. This is a rather good series of images put forward by a couple of public health agencies where to look. You have your sort of non-anatomical person pointing out that the ticks are in crevices, backs of the knees, around your belt area, belly button, under the arms, under the breasts, hair, ears. And if you didn't get the point about a tick starting low and crawling upwards to the first warm, dark, moist place where you're going to find it, yes, this image at the bottom will get it across. Step 1, sit on toilet. Step 2, stare. Step 3, is there a tick there? If there is, remove it. So that's a place not to forget. Okay, so prevention. We've covered that. All right, what about early detection? We have started talking about seeing the tick before they have a good chance to get a snack on you. So yes, get a tick on you, what are you gonna do? Again, this is sort of word heavy advice. Here's some pictures. This I've stolen from the CDC again. They've got fairly good graphics. You can use any tool you want, forceps, specialized tick removal keys or twisters or what have you. And you're going to grab the tick close to the skin, just pull up slowly, steadily. If you want to be uttering profanities, if you want to scream, weep, cry, whatever you want, just get the tick off. It's all quite acceptable. It says don't remove the ticks with your bare hands, but if your bare hands is what you got handy, better to do that than to leave the tick on you for the 2 days it takes you to hike out of the woods. The good news about removing a tick, both from you and your pets, is it won't hurt. Caveat with pets, if you take that massive hunks of hair, that will hurt them. They will object. The CDC very helpfully suggests that you don't apply kerosene or other flammable things to the tick. And then on the next page, if you click this for more there's a little for more information, click. And if you do that, it tells you that if you have used kerosene, do not then use a lit match. My feeling is that if you're going to put kerosene on your body and then apply a lit match, probably Lyme disease is not your most immediate problem, but that's just me. Safe time, there actually isn't. So the longer the tick is on you, the more likely it is to transmit infection, but every tick is different. Some feed quickly, some feed slowly. Some had already started feeding on some random squirrel or mouse before it found you. So they will transmit more quickly. The short version is get it off you as quickly as possible. If you're likely to encounter ticks in the morning, why don't you check it yourself at noon instead of waiting till the evening? Okay, so let's say you found a tick. Let's say you've pulled it off yourself, and there are a couple of approaches. Approach 1 is to scream and crush it and then flush it down the toilet. Yeah, it works, but there's something you can do first, and that's something that helps you. The first thing you need to do is figure out what kind of tick it is. Now, you can either know enough about ticks to figure it out if this doesn't repulse you. The smaller ones are blacklegged ticks. Those are the bad ones. The bigger ones with a little bit of white on the back are the wood ticks, or also known as dog ticks. If you have to have a tick on you, that's the one to have. So there are different degrees of panic if you can identify the tick. If you can't identify the tick, there is etick.ca, which is the public health website that will identify it for you if you send them a picture. Don't send them the ticks, just send them pictures. Or you can send me a picture and I'll identify it for you. All right. Let's say it's a black-legged tick. Let's say you're worried. Well, you can get the tick tested. I am sorry, we now have to charge for testing. We held off having to charge for as long as we could. We were first funded through research funding. Then we were funded by people donating money to help other people, and there are just too many ticks. So now people have to pay. But we'll identify it for you for free. We can do that much. So you can get the tick tested, and what that'll do is it will tell you what's inside your tick, as opposed to what is the general risk for all ticks in your region. Because really what matters to you is what was in your tick. All right. Let's say you don't find the tick and things get desperate. If you get Lyme disease, it's not something that'll go away by itself, to the best of our knowledge. You get very sick, it's progressive, and for the people suffering who are listening to this, I'm so sorry. I've been there. I was lucky enough to catch it early, but this is not trivial. This is absolutely horrible. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to talk in detail about this. We're also, conveniently for me, coming to the end of my allotted period to talk about ticks, which means that we could open this up to questions and discussion. And if people want to talk about this being a challenge, it is. It is particularly a challenge in Canada. How do we deal with people who've been sick for a long time and who have really serious chronic debilitating illness? It is a problem. It's more than, hey, swollen knees. The bacteria can be found in any of the major tissue organs of the body, including the brain. And no, it's not good to have bacteria in any of those essential vital organs because they're called vital for a reason. Not everyone gets a rash. Not every rash looks perfect. And up here is a picture of a real rash as opposed to the Wikipedia rash. And the frequency with which you get a rash varies. Some Canadian data that only about 2/3 of the people got a rash of any kind, and less than a quarter got a bullseye rash. From a study out of the IWK, it was even lower of people getting rashes. So don't count on the rash. But with that somewhat dire and gloomy ending, I am going to point out that we do live in the most beautiful part of the world. It's gorgeous. We don't have extremes of climates. No one's bombing us. We can engage in recreational activities. We can work outside. There are lots of good reasons to be outside, from gardening to lying on your stomach, photographing a puffin. Less sure about that. Puffins can be vicious. But we need to get outside, so we just have to do it safely. And that involves dealing with nature in all of its complexities. So I don't think we need to dwell on my usual ending slide. This reminds me to ask for comments and questions. And if people want to try an engorged tick scone, I will point out that this is a joke. So I'm going to stop sharing right after I figure out how. And I'm very happy to have people share their experiences, comments, questions, anything people want to do.
Great. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. Have to say, very interesting topic to begin with, but you took it to another level there, definitely. And so if anyone does have any questions, you can type them in our Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, not the usual chat section there. Vanessa says, such great info. Thank you so much. And I just also have a question. You kind of piqued my interest a little when you said they use a sense of smell. I never thought ticks to have a quote unquote sense of smell. So is there a comparison for how strong that is, or just any sort of data at all?
Yeah, well, we don't think of ticks as having a sense of smell because they don't have an obvious nose, because that's where our sense of smell comes from. Their smelling organs are on their wrists, or the equivalent, what passes for a wrist. They're very, very good at smelling the signals of food, which is a mammal who is sweating and who is breathing. So basically, if you're breathing, you have blood, and they care about you, but not in a good way.
Fair enough, yeah. Steve Mockford says, thanks for an interesting and informative talk, Vett. As well as Jennifer is asking, what do you do if you pull it out and the whole tick doesn't come out?
Ah, yes, that's a really important question. It's good to get as much of the tick out as possible, because ticks are not super sterile, and the bit of the tick that's inside of you can bring in a bacterial infection. That said, the part of the tick body that has the Lyme disease bacteria, we think of it as in the head, but technically ticks don't have a head, they just have a mouth shoved onto their shoulders, which is, again, disturbing and strange, but so is everything about ticks. So the part where they have most of the Lyme disease bacteria is kind of in their chest region. If I were a tick, use your imagination. So as long as you get most of the body out, you've got the source of bacteria. And you can decide which is going to be worse, digging around in your body to get the last little bits of the tick, just the same way you'd remove a splinter, and for the same reason, because it's not necessarily clean and it can cause a surface infection, or just leaving it there and letting things take their course in terms of it getting infected and pussy. But, you know, yeah, you choose.
Great, thanks. We have a question coming in from Facebook. It says, I sent a tick off my dog in years ago. It was free then. How much is it now to get a tick tested?
I'm glad you got it while it was free. And I just feel terrible about that. I would love to see tick testing being incorporated as part of our healthcare system, because they are a healthcare risk. But that's not, I'm a scientist, I'm not a healthcare policy person. So to actually answer the question, it's $50 to test a tick. If you're part of an organization, talk your organization into getting a group discount. We take the term group very liberally. So more than one person is a group as far as I'm concerned.
Great, thank you. If a person is infected, how long does it take for Lyme disease symptoms to present? This is asked by Heather.
So it varies by the person, but generally speaking, the first signs your body will mount against an infection are fairly non-specific. You can have fever, sometimes a rash, but these are just the sign of any infection. And if you're as skilled a chef as I am, it could also be a sign of food poisoning. To get the signs that you really do have Lyme disease is usually considered to take 3 to 4 weeks. That's the time it takes the bacteria to travel from your skin close to the tick bite site and travel through your body and then start causing problems as it colonizes things like your joints and other parts of your body. So you have it's not tick bite, I'm going to die the next day type of thing. You have time, which is nice. It does mean that that time can be well spent in trying to figure out if you can manage it. Test the tick. There's also in Nova Scotia treatment available in terms of prophylactic treatment. That's known as the single dose antibiotic treatment. There's conflicting results on how effective it is, but it may be better than nothing, or it may not be. Depends on who you believe. In terms of the research studies, there hasn't been enough research on it. However, that treatment only works if you catch it really early. So if the tick's been feeding on you for a couple days, it's not going to work. Antibiotics will still work, but not just the single dose thing. You need to take it for longer.
Okay, thank you. We also have Douglas asking, what was the website with the landscaping recommendations?
You can navigate to it from my lab website, which is lloydticklab.ca. If you go under resources, which is one of the tabs there, and now that we've figured out how to fix the website, it was broken for a while, sorry, you can get the landscaping recommendations.
Great, and we have that website linked in our chat box as well. What is the status of inoculation research at this point?
Status of, sorry, what?
Like inoculation, I'm assuming vaccine research.
Okay.
At this point.
Nothing's available in Canada for humans. There are vaccines for dogs, and veterinarians will use the dog vaccine for horses too. There's less concern about cats becoming symptomatic with Lyme disease, although it's possible if you have an older cat. For humans, there are clinical trials happening in Europe and the United States. They may start happening in Canada, but nothing in the immediate future. And whether that approach is going to work for everyone is hard to say. Something I'm very excited about is a pilot trial in the States inoculating mice. And that may sound weird, but the thing is, if the mice don't have Lyme disease, the ticks can't get it from them and they can't give it to us. And to inoculate mice, this sounds odd, you're not going to run around with a whole bunch of little tiny mice syringes trying to catch every mouse. You put it in bait, much the way they do the rabies vaccine for wildlife. The mice eat the bait because that's pretty much what wild rodents do. They eat and then have more wild rodents. And also if there are any side effects because they get too much vaccine or too little, it's a wild mouse. Nobody really cares. I'm sorry for the wild mice out there listening. I'm hoping that that will get off the ground and can start being used more broadly.
Thank you. We have another Facebook question. It says, the hospital in St. John does send ticks off of humans to Winnipeg for testing, and it's covered by Medicare there. Would it be covered province-wide for humans, or?
It's hit and miss, and it also changes depending on capacity in the hospital and capacity at the main testing lab in Winnipeg. So it's certainly not province-wide. It's a start. One thing is that the lab in Winnipeg, they do everything, so they get backlogged. So it may take a while to get a result back. So you will probably have had, you and your healthcare provider will have had to make a decision beforehand. But it is fantastic that there are some circumstances where that still happens.
Thank you. Brenda says, thank you, Vett and MTRI. Awareness and education is key.
Thanks, Brenda.
As well as we have a question coming from Wayne and asks, you said the cost of testing is $50 for an individual. How much is it for that organization or group discount? That
it's half. If you're part of a group, it's half.
Nice. Marilyn is asking, how long after an infection does the test still detect Lyme?
Oh, that's a super question. So the blood test doesn't work immediately because the blood test is not detecting the Lyme bacteria, it's detecting your antibodies against the bacteria. So in that sense, it's not like the COVID rapid test. So you have to wait till your body makes antibodies. So that's going to take a couple weeks. And so we know it doesn't work right at the beginning. And then the question is, how long does it keep working? And there's a lot of variability in the answers when you read the literature. Some will say forever, but their definition of forever is a year after the infection, which I'd like to think is not forever. The answer differs between dogs and humans. A lot of the research has been done on dogs. Once you start getting really sick, or if you're in any way immune compromised, and that can be anything from taking medications to just being plain old like me, your immune response is less robust and you may test negative. So a shorter answer to that question. Sorry, I'm a scientist. You always get complex answers, even a simple question. The blood test doesn't work immediately, and it may wear off after about a year.
Great, which leads us to our next question. This one comes from Facebook. It says, thank you so much for this presentation, Dr. Lloyd. Are there tests for humans that can detect an active infection versus a past infection? Or is there work into those?
Yes, there is. The standard blood test that's done is looking for antibodies, so that can't distinguish between I have an infection now or I had an infection and I got rid of it. But there's a test that looks at another aspect of the immune system that is responding only to active infection. So that can distinguish between active versus previous infection. There's a lot of work working to detect the actual bacteria. So stop looking at what the human body is doing and actually look for the bacteria. It's technically more challenging. So at the moment, if you need to answer that question, you're looking at the T cell aspect of the immune system, and currently that testing is available primarily only privately. So you're going to have to pay for it.
Thank you. And we have another Facebook question. Why are doctors so reluctant to believe it could be Lyme and continue to look for other diseases except for Lyme?
Well, that's a question you're going to have to ask a doctor, but that is known as dodging the question. Sorry. The symptoms of Lyme disease are similar to other diseases. There's been a history of assuming that Lyme disease is not really very serious. So very rightly, a doctor wants to check out what they perceive as the serious diseases first, and it's good to exclude those. If your symptoms are being caused by a brain tumor, really good to rule that out. On the other hand, that is a fairly expensive and time-consuming way to deal with the problem. And with more and more ticks in the Maritimes, particularly Nova Scotia, more infected people, this index of suspicion for Lyme disease should be a lot higher. So it's a good place to start. There are more people with Lyme disease than there are people with other diseases that might look the same.
Thank you. I believe that brings us to the end of our question period. I don't have any more on my screen, and Facebook looks clear as well. So I would once again like to thank you, Dr. Lloyd, for this presentation, and thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. For anyone interested in joining us next Thursday, August 11th, for our next summer seminar, we'll be joined by MTRI staff member Carter Feltham and Coastal Action staff Noah Hardy for their presentation on the Nova Scotia Herp Atlas. I'd like to thank the Region of Queens for supporting us and our seminar series. As always, you can stay up to date with our seminars by following us on Facebook. And if you would like to watch any of our seminars again, even tonight's seminar again, you can check out our Facebook Live video or visit our YouTube channel. We hope everyone stays well and we get to see you all again very soon.